They warned us not to say her name near the fire. Not because they believed the legend, but because she did. And now one of us is missing. We thought it was just a campfire story. But last night, we heard her breathing in the dark. The night we arrived at Black Hollow Camp, the wind carried a strange scent, like rain that never fell and ashes that had never burned. I was the last one to get out of the van, standing there for a moment too long with my duffel bag clenched tight and my eyes scanning the treeline. "Come on, Luke," Rachel called from ahead. "You're not going to get eaten by a bear." I forced a laugh and followed, the gravel crunching under my boots louder than it should have been. The others had already gone inside the old ranger's cabin, our weekend home away from everything. There were 7 of us. Me, Rachel, Joey, Sarah, Mike, Lexi, and Thomas. A group of 20-somethings who had decided to relive one last childhood summer before real life swallowed us whole. Black Hollow had been abandoned for years. No running programs, no official oversight. Just an empty camp surrounded by endless trees and the ghosts of local legend. That first night, we built the fire in the same pit the counselors once used, sitting in a loose circle of faded logs and broken benches. It felt natural, easy, the kind of ritual every camper knows by heart. Esmores, stupid jokes, and of course, scary stories. Rachel took the lead. Her voice lowered, her tone dramatic. "You guys know about the Hollow Woman, right?" A few chuckles, a few groans. "She's just a story," Mike muttered, waving a hand. But Rachel shook her head, eyes catching the firelight. She wasn't made up. The locals say her name was Mara Sylvan. She worked here in the 70s. They found her alone in the woods, humming to herself, covered in blood. They say she went mad after her daughter drowned in the lake. "Sounds fake," Joey mumbled, roasting a marshmallow. Rachel's smile didn't fade. "You think so? They say if you say her name 3 times, while the fire's burning, she'll come back." "Oh, come on," Lexi laughed. "That's just Bloody Mary with pine needles." Rachel leaned forward, her face half in shadow. "Mara Sylvan. Mara Sylvan. Mara Sylvan." Silence. For a full 10 seconds, the fire crackled, and the woods seemed to breathe. Something shifted behind us. A branch snapped deep in the trees. Joey flinched. That wasn't funny, but Rachel just laughed and grabbed another beer. That night, I couldn't sleep. The others passed out quickly, snoring in tangled sleeping bags on the floor of the cabin, but I stared at the ceiling. My bunk creaked every time I moved. I swear I heard footsteps, soft, dragging footsteps, outside the window around 3 a.m. But when I sat up and looked, nothing was there. The next morning, Thomas was gone. At first, we thought he had gone for a hike, but his shoes were still by the door, and his phone was on the nightstand. No one had seen or heard him leave. We split up and searched the area. Mike and Joey checked the woods behind the cabin. Sarah and Lexi walked down toward the lake. I stayed near the fire pit, kicking through the ashes from the night before. That's when I saw it. Carved into the charred wood of one of the benches, in jagged, uneven slashes, was a name. Mara. I didn't say anything right away. Not because I didn't believe it was real, but because I didn't want it to be. I told myself it had been there before, that someone else had done it years ago. But deep down, I knew it hadn't been there last night. Hours passed. No sign of Thomas. By sunset, panic had set in. Mike wanted to drive into town and call for help, but Rachel convinced us to wait. She insisted Thomas had just wandered off and would come back. She said the campfire story was just a joke, but I could see something in her eyes, some twitch of guilt she couldn't quite hide. That night, no one wanted to light the fire, but the cold crept in fast, and Joey, trying to stay sane, eventually caved and started it. We sat in tense silence, no stories, no laughter, just flickering flames and the whisper of wind through the trees. Then we heard it, a humming sound. It came from the woods, soft and broken, like an old music box winding down. No one moved. Rachel's hand clutched mine so tightly her nails dug into my skin. Sarah stood up. "Thomas." The humming stopped. A moment later, something moved just beyond the firelight. We all turned at once, and for a fraction of a second, I swear, I saw a shape. Pale, thin, hair hanging over its face, standing between the trees. Then gone. Sarah screamed. Lexi bolted back into the cabin. Mike ran toward the woods, but Joey grabbed his arm. "Don't," he snapped. "You saw it too." We didn't sleep. We barricaded the door, pushed furniture in front of the windows, and sat with our backs against the wall, weapons in hand, a frying pan, a broken chair leg, a rusted fishing knife. Whatever we could find. By morning, the fire was out, and so was our last shred of disbelief. We wanted to leave, but Mike's van wouldn't start. The battery was dead, completely drained, despite being brand new. We were stuck. That's when Rachel finally admitted what she hadn't said the night before. "I didn't make up the story," she said, her voice shaking. "I read it in a forum online. A post from someone who stayed here. He said once you say her name, it's done. She picks one of you, and she doesn't stop until they're all gone." Lexi burst into tears. Sarah slapped Rachel. Joey paced like a caged animal. And me? I sat in the corner, staring at the wall, trying not to hear the faint sound of someone humming just outside. The morning after Thomas vanished was gray and suffocating. No beat at sun, no wind, just that thick, unmoving silence that feels like it's watching you. We sat around the cold fire pit, not talking, barely breathing. No one dared relight it. Rachel sat with her knees pulled to her chest, eyes hollow, as though she hadn't slept in days, even though it had only been one. I watched her lips move, silently repeating something under her breath. I didn't ask what. "Guys," Lexi whispered, her voice raw. "We have to get out. Now." Mike kicked the van door in frustration. "Battery's toast. We need to jump, and we're 30 miles from the nearest town. There has to be another way," Joey snapped. "There's not," Rachel whispered. "We're trapped. That's how it works." Mike turned on her. "What works? This isn't a curse, Rachel. It's not some ghost story. It's Mara," she said quietly. "She doesn't like being forgotten." And then, as if summoned by her name, something slammed against the side of the cabin. Hard. We all froze. Another slam, closer to the window. Then came the soft, deliberate scrape of fingers down the glass. Lexi screamed and bolted for the back door. "No." Joey lunged for her, but she was too fast. She flung it open and disappeared into the woods. The door creaked shut behind her, and the silence returned, deafening and heavy. We waited, seconds stretched into minutes. Then, somewhere out in the trees, we heard Lexi's voice. It was warped, slow, like she was underwater. "She's so cold." Then nothing. We searched again, of course. Hours this time. We shouted her name until our voices cracked. But we didn't find Lexi. Not even her footprints. As if the woods had swallowed her whole. It was Sarah who suggested we try the old boathouse. I saw it on the map in the cabin. If there's a boat, maybe we can paddle to the ranger station. It was a stretch, but a plan. We followed a half-faded trail through the trees, avoiding the fire pit like it was cursed ground. By late afternoon, we found it, half collapsed and smothered in moss. The boathouse leaned into the lake like it was trying to drown itself. Still, a canoe sat inside, surprisingly intact, bobbing gently in the water. Sarah let out a sob of relief and ran to it. That's when we noticed the carving in the dock planks. Mara owns this water. It looked fresh, the wood around the letters still raw. Sarah didn't care. She climbed into the boat and pushed off. If I can get to the other side, I'll find help. I'll come back for you. Don't go alone, Mike shouted, but it was too late. She was already drifting across the black, still lake. The canoe made it maybe 20 feet before it stopped moving. Not slowed. Stopped. It was like something had grabbed it from below. We watched, paralyzed, as Sarah looked down into the water. Her scream, short and shrill, cut through the silence just before she was yanked under with unnatural force. The boat didn't tip. It didn't rock. Just an eerie, flat glide backward, empty. A moment later, the lake's surface rippled, then settled, and we were three. Back at the cabin, no one spoke for hours. Mike sat with his back to the door, holding the rusted fishing knife like it could somehow protect us from a legend that shouldn't exist. Joey paced in tight circles, muttering to himself about generators, survivalist forums, anything to stay logical. Rachel was gone inside herself. She hadn't blinked in minutes. That's when I found the journal, tucked behind a loose floorboard in the bedroom, wrapped in oilcloth and covered in years of dust. It was old, the pages yellowed and brittle, but the entries were written in a steady hand. The name on the first page read, Margot Sylvan, her daughter, Mara's child, the one who had supposedly drowned. Except she hadn't. The entries told the story. Margot had faked her death. She couldn't take her mother's obsession, the strange rituals, the way Mara spoke to shadows. So she ran, left her clothes on the dock, vanished, and Mara went mad with grief. But it wasn't just sadness, it was rage. Rage so deep it called something out of the woods. She started hearing things, speaking in tongues, drawing circles in the ash around the fire pit. And then the children started disappearing. One by one, the camp was shut down quietly. No press, no records, just erased. And Mara? She walked into the lake one night and was never seen again. The last page of the journal held one final warning, written in frantic, ink-smudged letters. Don't light the fire. Don't say her name. She hears it, and she remembers. I showed the journal to Mike and Joey. Rachel wouldn't look at it. She just whispered, I said it 3 times, didn't I? I nodded. Then the lights flickered once, twice, and went out completely. We were plunged into darkness. Then that humming again, right outside the walls. Only now it wasn't soft. It was loud and angry. Mike moved to the window and peeked out. He stepped back fast, pale, shaking. She's right there, he whispered. Who? Joey asked, clutching his flashlight. Mike swallowed hard. Lexi. But she's not, right? We opened the door. Lexi stood at the edge of the fire pit, soaked and barefoot, eyes wide and black. Her skin had that bloated, waterlogged look like she'd been pulled from the bottom of a well. Her head tilted slowly, unnaturally, as if her neck bones were jelly. And then she smiled. But it wasn't her smile. Mara says hello, she croaked. And then she stepped into the cold ashes of the fire pit and vanished. No sound, no flash, just gone. Rachel collapsed. Joey screamed. Mike ran. And I stood there, staring at the pit, because I could still hear Lexi's voice inside my head. Mara doesn't forgive. We didn't speak after Lexi vanished. There was no scream, no struggle, no trace, just ashes where she had stood, and that eerie, taunting voice burned into our skulls. Mara says hello. Joey sat in a corner of the cabin, trembling and refusing to look at anyone. Rachel had slipped into a near catatonic state, rocking gently, muttering her name over and over like a prayer or a curse. Only Mike remained composed, pacing like a caged predator, whispering plans under his breath. I couldn't feel my hands, not from the cold, but from numbness, a creeping paralysis that came from realizing we were truly hunted. That night, None of us slept. Instead, we barricaded ourselves in tighter than before. Wooden planks nailed over the windows, furniture stacked at the doors, even the fireplace blocked. We didn't care about smoke or oxygen. We cared about her. At some point after midnight, Mike snapped. "I'm not staying in here to die." He grabbed a fishing knife, a flashlight, and one of the camp maps we'd found in the ranger's drawer. "There's an old chapel deep in the woods. Says it was closed in '79. I think that's where Mara started all this. That's where it ends." "You can't go out there alone," I said, grabbing his arm. He looked me in the eye, hollow but sharp. "Then come with me." I looked at Rachel, at Joey, at the madness in their faces, the hopelessness. I nodded. The forest was pitch black, the flashlight barely cutting through the dense fog that had crawled in from the lake. Trees stretched like skeletal fingers above us, creaking with age, whispering secrets we couldn't understand. We moved fast but careful. Every twig snap made us jump. Every flutter of an unseen wing made us stop and hold our breath. But then we heard something behind us. Footsteps. Not quiet, not stealthy, deliberate. We turned. The beam of the flashlight swung through the trees and landed on Thomas. He stood half naked, soaking wet, his head twitching as if on a puppet string. His eyes were milky white, his mouth stretched into a too-wide grin. "Mara loves it when you run," he croaked. Mike didn't hesitate. He bolted into the trees. I followed, heart slamming against my ribs, lungs burning. The woods turned unfamiliar fast. Trees shifted. Paths vanished. The deeper we ran, the louder she got. Not her voice. Her presence. Like a fog curling under your skin. A song with no words that played from inside your bones. Suddenly we saw it. The chapel. Or what was left of it. An old, rotting building overtaken by vines and moss. The stained glass windows were shattered. The steeple had collapsed into the forest floor like a broken crown. Still, it stood defiant and wrong. We pushed open the door. The smell hit us first. Mildew, rot, and something metallic. Inside, the pews had been shoved aside to form a crude circle of ash. Symbols were carved into the walls, scratches that pulsed in the dim light of the flashlight. And at the center of the altar, a mirror, but it didn't reflect us. It reflected the fire pit, the one at camp. Only this time, there was a figure standing in it. She was tall, drenched in shadows. Her face was hidden by stringy, wet hair, her dress rotted through and clinging to a corpse-thin frame. Her arms dangled low, fingers twitching like dying spiders. Mara. She turned in the mirror and looked through it, at us. Mike raised a knife. We had to hear, but before he could move, something grabbed his ankle from beneath the floorboards. He screamed and hit the ground hard. I lunged, tried to pull him back, but the board split, splinters flying, and a gray, bloated hand shot up from the floor. It was Sarah. What was left of her? Her neck twisted with a sickening crack, and she pulled at Mike like a dog burying a bone. Mara wants more. She hissed through a mouth full of lake water. Mike screamed. The knife skittered across the floor. I reached for it, but the entire chapel shook. Candles we hadn't lit flared to life. The mirror began to glow. Mara stepped out of it. Not figuratively. She stepped out of the mirror. Smoke curled around her feet. Her body cracked and groaned like rotted would come into life. Her face. I can't describe her face, because it wasn't one. It was many. Like the skin of every camper she'd taken had been stretched across her skull. Eyes blinked in the wrong places. Mouths twitched open without sound. She moved toward me. I ran. I ran like hell. Mike's screams followed me out of the chapel and into the trees. They didn't stop. Not until I reached the edge of camp and realized I was alone. Back at the cabin, Joey was gone. Only Rachel remained. She didn't look surprised when I burst in, covered in scratches and mud, babbling about Mara walking through mirrors. "I know," she whispered. "I saw her." "You saw?" "In the lake. She showed me what she wants." I knelt in front of her. "What does she want, Rachel?" Her voice cracked. "She wants us to remember. That's all she ever wanted. To be remembered." Histoire de her. Then why the killing? Because we only remember the things that hurt us the most. And then, with a calmness that terrified me, Rachel picked up the knife from the table and handed it to me. "You need to end this." "What do you mean?" "She chose me next," she said. She whispered it in my ear when I slept. "Mara won't stop unless someone chooses to remember her forever. And then she did something I'll never forget." She smiled and stepped outside into the night. I ran after her, but the moment she crossed the edge of the fire pit, the air changed. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. The ground turned soft and wet like something breathing just beneath it. She turned to me, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Tell them, Luke. Tell everyone. Don't let her fade." Then a shadow erupted from the fire pit like a geyser of ink. And she was gone. I didn't sleep after Rachel vanished. How could I? The fire still flickered outside the cabin, but it wasn't warmth that gave off anymore. It was her. Mara. I could feel her like fingers drumming along the walls, tapping at the edge of my sanity. Every time I blinked, I saw Rachel's last smile. Not fearful, not angry, willing. She had chosen to go. That part haunted me most. The knife still sat on the floor, glinting in the gray light of dawn that barely filtered through the boarded-up windows. I picked it up, not as a weapon, but as a question. What was I supposed to do with it now? What could I possibly cut that would sever this nightmare? That's when I saw the book. It hadn't been there before. Thick, bound in leather too old to be anything but real. It sat on the bunk where Rachel had slept, as though it had always belonged there, waiting for someone to notice it. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were pages of old maps, photographs, and notes, all chronicling Camp Ashwood through the decades. Fires, disappearances, shadows and photographs where no shadows should be. But what chilled me to my core were the entries dated back to 1953, the first mention of Mara Calloway. A counselor, a loner, an orphan raised in the nearby woods by a reclusive woman they called the Swamp Witch. Mara had been hired to work the camp's infirmary until the summer ended in tragedy. 7 children drowned in one night. Not in the lake, but in bathtubs, found in their cabins, lungs filled with water, their eyes wide open. Mara disappeared that night. Never charged, never found. But the camp closed immediately. Rumors whispered of rituals, of curses, of children's spirits calling out from the water. The book ended with one final line, etched in a darker, scratchier hand. She doesn't want forgiveness. She wants memory, and blood remembers better than words. I closed the book. Then I ran. I followed the trail Rachel had taken, past the fire pit, through the trees. The fog hadn't lifted with morning. If anything, it had grown thicker, heavier. The woods now felt aware, like they leaned in when I passed, watching me struggle to breathe. And then I heard them, children, laughing, soft, echoing through the trees like a ghost's lullaby. I followed the sound, boots sinking into the damp forest floor, until I reached a clearing I'd never seen on any map. There in the center was a circle of small bathtubs, rusted porcelain chipped and filled with stagnant water. And inside them, bones. Tiny bones. Some floated, some didn't. A child's hand poked above the surface of one tub, reaching toward the sky. I dropped to my knees, stomach lurching. Then something giggled behind me. I turned. There she was, Mara, but not like before. This time, She was young. A girl of maybe 13, pale and soaked in murky water, eyes too wide for her face. Her lips were stitched shut with lakeweed. Her hair floated around her head like she still stood underwater. And then she changed. In one blink, she grew older. Then older still. Her skin withered. Her eyes hollowed. Her arms lengthened unnaturally, stretching toward me. She cracked and twisted like time sped through her all at once. She pointed at the tubs, at the bones, then at me. I stepped back, tripped, and fell onto something hard. It was Joey's camera, still recording. I picked it up and replayed the footage. Shaky, but clear. It showed Joey stumbling through the forest, muttering to himself, breathing heavy. I see them. I see them everywhere. They're just standing there, watching me. I think they're the kids. I think she made them into shadows. He turned the camera toward the trees, and they were there. Figures. Dozens. Children with hollow eyes and gaping mouths, standing between trees like they'd grown there. And one of them looked just like Lexi. Suddenly, the camera glitched, screamed. Then it ended. I returned to camp, unsure how I made it back. The world had become distorted, warped by Mara's will. Time didn't feel linear anymore. It felt like everything was happening at once. The past, the present, the curse. The fire pit burned higher now. Not orange, blue. And inside it danced the shapes of those Mara had taken. Joey, Lexi, Rachel, Mike. They moved like puppets. Silhouettes cast against flame. Then I heard her voice, not spoken aloud, but inside my skull. Finish the story. I looked down. The knife was in my hand again. My palm was bleeding. Had I cut myself? Or had someone placed it there? I understood then. This wasn't just a haunting. It was a ritual, and I was at its end. I dragged the logs back from the fire pit, widened it, dug until my fingers bled. Beneath the ashes and roots, I found stone. A ring, carved with ancient markings and a name etched deep. Calloway. This was her grave. Her altar. She wasn't a ghost. She was a god in the making, born of memory, fueled by fear. Every person who died added to her form. Every whisper of her name gave her strength. Every retelling of the campfire story brought her closer. And now I was her scribe. I opened the camera. I pressed record. And I began. I told everything. The cabins. The mirrors. The drowned children. The chapel. The true story. And when I finished, the fire died. Silence fell. Even the wind stopped. For the first time in days, I felt alone. Utterly, terrifyingly alone. And then I heard her. One final time. Thank you. And I woke up. It was daylight. Real daylight. The fog had lifted. Birds were singing. The cabins were empty, but intact. The forest normal. I stumbled out of camp, down the dirt road, until I reached the ranger station. It was open. A woman sat behind the desk, startled when she saw me. "My God," she whispered. "You're one of the missing kids from Camp Ashwood." I think it's over," I muttered. She didn't respond. She only pointed to the TV on the wall. The news was playing, and on the screen was my face. Footage from the camera. Me talking into the lens, telling the story. It had uploaded. Somehow. Everywhere. My voice. My story. Mara's legend. I thought it would end with the fire. That once I told the story, once it left my lips and spilled into the world like black water, Mara would be satisfied. That she would sink back into the forest, into the soil, into the memory that birthed her. But the truth is, legends don't die. They just feed. And now, I had become the meal. It took less than 24 hours for the video to go viral. Not because I posted it. I never even touched the upload. But there was, on YouTube, TikTok, Reddit, even Facebook. The title? Real Campfire Curse Caught on Camera. He vanished after this. It was edited like a creepypasta short, complete with eerie music and timestamps where things moved in the background. I didn't add any of that, but it was there. People started calling it the Ashwood tape. Some said it was brilliant found footage. Others swore it was a hoax. But there were those, a small, obsessive few, who saw what I saw, who believed, and the views climbed. 1 million, then 2, then 10. That's when the emails began. I watched it, and now my TV won't turn off, even when it's unplugged. My daughter keeps humming that same tune from the fire scene. She says a wet woman is whispering it to her at night. Is that Lexi? At 1308? That's my cousin. She went missing at camp in the 90s. And then, one morning, I received a video from a random Gmail address. I opened it. The camera showed a suburban home, clean, bright, safe. A father was filming his son reenacting the campfire scene from the video. The boy's voice was a near-perfect mimic of mine. She doesn't want forgiveness. She wants memory. And then, he turned to the camera. His eyes were black. He smiled with Mara's stitched lips. And the feed cut out. That was the first. Hundreds followed. People reenacting the story, reading from the script, trying to summon the feeling, the fear, the myth. They were giving it shape. Mara didn't need me anymore. She had audiences. The curse had evolved. It had become content. I tried to run. I moved cities, changed my name, deleted all my accounts. But no matter where I went, someone was watching the Ashwood tape. On a train, in a diner, on phones, tablets, projected onto walls at night like ghostly cinema. Each time I passed it, I felt a flicker in my bones. Like recognition, like she was inside the pixels growing. And then the dreams returned. No matter where I slept, I dreamed of the fire pit, of the children, of the blue flames that danced without heat. I saw Rachel in every one, her skin waxy and eyes hollow, repeating that same sentence over and over. We have to finish the circle. Finish the story. Finish the story. Then one night I woke up in the woods again. Don't ask how. I don't remember driving. I don't remember walking. I only remember waking up barefoot in the fog with the whispering trees around me. Camp Ashwood stood ahead, restored. Not just intact, perfect, as if the years had never touched it. The cabins gleamed with fresh wood. The chapel's bell tolled gently in the breeze. The fire pit was alive again, burning bright blue. And around it, children, dozens, all facing inward, all humming. I stepped forward. Rachel looked up from the circle. She smiled. You made it. We're almost done. What is this? I choked. What's happening? She gave us a gift, Rachel said. We get to live forever. In the story, as long as people watch, we stay. Isn't that what you wanted, Luke? A story that never ends. I shook my head. This isn't life. But it's memory, she said. And that's what lasts. Then the children turned toward me in unison. Their mouths moved as one. Finish the story. And I knew what they meant. I was the last voice, the closing act, the storyteller. My memory would anchor the tale. I sat beside the fire. My hands no longer shook. I opened my mouth, and I spoke. Epilogue, a new spark. Somewhere, in a small house in Ohio, a teenage boy stumbles across a video in his recommended feed. It's titled simply, The Final Ashwood Tape, Uncut Footage. He clicks. The screen flickers. The fire crackles. A man's voice begins to speak. They said it was just a campfire story until it killed. As the tale unfolds, the boy doesn't notice the blue light seeping through the walls. He doesn't hear the water dripping from the ceiling. He doesn't see the shadow sitting beside him, mouth sewn shut, smiling. Because the story isn't over. It never ends. It waits for the next watcher, the next believer, the next storyteller. And you're watching now, aren't you? Welcome to Camp Ashwood. We hope you brought marshmallows. You'll be here a long time.